Okay, when we are recording, I had to make sure I captured my good side, my good profile. All right, I'm excited this morning to talk to you today about the power that hope has in our lives. Last week we talked about frustrations. Now, what is one of the biggest frustration killers there are? Hope, right? If you've got hope, the frustration seems to leave. And so last Sunday I said that when we see a person, a place, or a thing as our source in place of God, it inevitably will lead us to a place of frustration. God's plan, the very good stuff that He is cooking up in the kitchen, gets complicated when we try to tackle our frustrations in the natural realm, our own strength. Either by trying to force a plan B, that was Sarai, or like Hagar in trying to flee the situation altogether. And one of the things that I didn't mention last week is, did you know what Hagar's name means in the Hebrew? It means to flee. I thought that was very interesting. I missed that last week, so I went back and I took a look at it. That's terrible, to be called the fleer. It's Hagar, flee. But that's the truth of the matter. Now, if you're following along in our sermon notes, you'll see the very first slide. This was from last week. It's a repeat, but it was so good. It was an oldie but a goodie. I had to bring it back. God seeks you in your frustration, and He speaks to you, and He will revealing His compassion and His purpose. So I want to piggyback off last week's message, and I want to talk about hope for direction. When you are frustrated and you don't have any control, you still have a choice. You might say, Pastor, I feel stuck. I don't know what to do in this situation that I face. But if I have a biblical hope, which is way different than a worldly hope, I have this confident expectation. I might feel stuck. I might not know what to do. But I have a confident expectation of the future good that God is leading me into. He will lead me and He will guide me. And so, to get in the spirit of our I Hope series, go ahead and serenade your neighbor and tell him, sing to him, say, I got high hopes. I got high hopes. High apple pie in the sky hopes. Last week we were talking about Fetty Wap, and nobody knows who that is. This week we got old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra in the house. You never know what's coming next. And that's what Sarai and Abram were looking for, was high hopes. High in the sky apple pie hopes. Hope for direction that would lead them to the fulfillment of the promise that God made to them, that their descendants would be as numerous as the sand on the seashore, as the stars in the sky. They heard the promise from God. They still believed in the promise, but they thought that they needed to help God along in the process. They know that the God of the universe would deliver, but they thought they needed a plan B to help it along. God is not dependent on our plan B. In the midst of 10 years, Abram already had his AARP card for quite some time. And so, of course, in the natural, you can see why it would be easy for him to get a little antsy to try to, and for him and Sarai to try to bring about the promise in their time instead of God's. But I don't want to talk about Sarai, Abram, and Hagar any longer. I want to talk about the promised Messiah who came and fulfilled God's plan for us. And so we're there in John chapter 8. John chapter 8. I want to ask you a question before we dive right into the text. And be honest, okay? This is a judgment-free zone. So you can go ahead and raise your hand and own it and say, that is me, Pastor Matt, because what I'm going to ask you, I'm going to raise my hand myself. If I were to take away your cell phone, and I was to ask you to meet me, let's say, at the Meijer in Sterling Heights, how many of you would be able to get there without using your cell phone? Raise your hand. All right, about half of us. All right. Not me. I grew up in Warren. I know all about Sterling Heights, but I would end up lost. I depend on my phone for everything. In fact, the funny thing about it is when I need Siri the most, when I'm in the middle of nowhere, guess when my phone doesn't want to respond and act. And so I can't seem to get any direction, any reception when I'm in the middle of my nowhere, when I'm depending on my cell phone the most. We can learn to look to Jesus for direction and guidance in our lives. And the beautiful thing about that, what's different than our cell phones, is whenever I ask, "Can you hear me now? God, I'm stuck. God, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. God, I need some direction." God is never going to drop the call. He's never going to lose reception. And I love it because we have a daddy that we can go to who knows the way. He's got an answer. In fact, he sent his son who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I remember years ago I was at Meijer, thanks to my cell phone. My cell phone led me the way. It worked that time, and I ended up in the store. This is before I ever had any kids. I would do the Meijer, 12 o'clock, I want a burrito type of a run. Anybody ever been there, done that? It's like, we got no burritos in the house. What are we going to eat? Let's go to Meijer. And so this is before I had any kids. And but this time it wasn't real late. And I got to Meijer, and I walk in, and I'm in the produce section, which is kind of strange for a teenager to be in the produce section of Meijer. Usually you avoid that. And there is this father who is there, and he's got this young little girl, about 3 years old, and she has a meltdown right in the middle of the store. And it was like she was making grape angels. She knocked all the grapes down, and she's on the floor, and she's just flailing. And I'm like, wow, it's angelic. Look at that angel shape on the floor. That's not really what I was thinking. I was thinking in my mind, Dad, you got to get it together, man. Come on. She's only 3. It's one-on-one here. You got to be able to handle this situation. I didn't say anything, but I thought that. And I said, someday when I'm a dad, there will be no meltdowns. Remember, that's before I had any kids. That's not working out so well. So, I remember I was at Beaumont Hospital. Ava had just been born. It was the next day, and it was beautiful because Evan, when she was born, there was just this excitement about having a new sister. He was so excited. And I loved it. I thought it would last forever. It lasted 12 hours. It was the greatest 12 hours I ever experienced. And so he was tired, I was tired, and he has a meltdown right in the middle of the hospital, not in our private room. Like, we were like, oh, let's go and get a snack. That'll calm him down. We'll go get a snack. We'll go walk down this long corridor, and everything will be great. And I remember, I'm like, wow, this has gone bad fast, and I better get back to the room as quick as I can. And so he's having a meltdown, and it created a scene, and everybody's looking at me. And I'm about to get into the elevator, and there's this one young guy who actually stops me and says something to me in the middle of trying to control this situation. And I'll never forget it, because I stopped him because I know he was trying to be, I don't know what he was trying to be. I'm not even going to comment on what he's trying to be. I stopped him in the middle of what he was saying, and I said, I know what you're going to say. Come on, Dad, get it together, right? And he looked at me like bewildered, and I had a prophetic word for him. I said, one day, you'll remember this moment. One day, when you have kids, you're going to have a flashback in Beaumont Hospital when you're looking at me face to face as I'm trying to escape in this elevator. And he just kind of like shrugged it off. But I guarantee you, I promise, just like I had a flashback in that moment of Meijer, he too, one day with kids, will have that same moment. Parenting is complex. The more kids I have, the less I feel I know about parenting. Can I get an amen from our parents? Each child is so uniquely different. For my son Evan, if I set him down at all, he could be asleep in my arms for 3 hours. The moment I put him down, he'd start crying. With Ava, it took me forever to figure out she didn't want me to hold her. She's independent, Miss Independent. She wants to be on the floor. She wants to be able to control her own destiny, to move around, do whatever she wants to do. The minute I picked her up, she'd start crying. And what worked for one child didn't work for the next. And so being a parent is difficult. I need more than just advice and insight. I need some light from God so I can navigate these parenting challenges that I face every moment. But the beautiful thing is I have hope. I hope for the beautiful thing, even when I make mistakes as a parent, of what God's creating in my family environment and what my children are going to grow and become. I hope. That's exactly why I'm excited to look at John 8. Let's look at John 8, verse 12. Jesus says something very powerful here. He says, I am the light of the world. He is the light that will guide our very lives. Wherever you are at in your life, whether you are facing a career decision, a parenting decision, a decision about possibly moving, He is the light that we need. There is hope for direction. I believe He gives us light for that next step, that He invites us into this amazing journey, this amazing faith journey with Him. Step by step, He will lead us forth with His guiding light. Verse 12, Jesus spoke to the people once more, the text says. He says, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness, because you will have light that leads to life. You won't have to walk in darkness. I thought about that phrase all week. You won't have to walk in darkness. I found a video that I believe illustrates this point beautifully. There is an adorable bulldog named Diesel. And all I can say is, Diesel, you don't have to walk in darkness anymore. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. Let's take a look.
Is he a boxer?
He's a boxer. He's got a box top over his head.
I got it, Jim.
And I love this video. Oh, he thought he had it. And this is one of my favorite parts coming up. He does a quick little circle, and then boom, right back into it again. All right, there we go. That's Diesel for us. That's Diesel. How many of us in here have ever felt in our lives a little bit like Diesel before? I think we all have, right? This video was actually much longer. And in the entire video, Diesel not once ever puts down that box top. He is committed to that thing. It might lead him to fall off the edge of the curb. He actually walks into another vehicle that would hurt even more. He goes into the wall several more times, but he's not going to put down the box top. I believe that's a perfect illustration of what it looks like to walk in darkness. If we were to set down whatever's blinding us, our own box top, what would happen? What would happen if I was to allow the light of the world to guide me forth? That I depend on Him for my direction, leading me to paths of life. How incredible would this journey of life be? Holding on to the box top is really, it's a metaphor for sin. It's a metaphor for sin. Jesus has set us free from the box top. We have a decision to make. We don't have to have that thing up here anymore. And what is the box top? What is our box top? It could be a lot of things. It could be behavior. I've heard people say things like, "Don't get me mad." Ooh, I got a temper. And I like to stop people if they ever say something like that, is I say, "No, you don't." And they look at me, they're like, "No, just ask my spouse if I've got a temper. Ask my kids. Ask my neighbor if I've got a temper." And I said, "No, you don't. The old you did. The new you in Christ is patient, is kind, is all the good things that are found in Christ's nature has been given to you." And so when you hear something that doesn't fit a fellow believer, let's get this line down. Let's try that one again. Let's tell them that. Let's try that one again. You don't have to hold on to that box top anymore. I've got a temper. And it leads me to stumble into things. Here's another attitude one. I always give up. No, that's the old you. The new you is more than a conqueror. The new you is a victorious member of the royal family of God. That's who you are. What could a box top be? You know, box tops are not always bad things. I know we use it as a metaphor for sin, but they're not always bad things. They could be good things that turn into bad things. For instance, could be something, I got a box top right here. Relationships. Relationships. We hold on to things. Boy meets girl. Girl meets boy. They hold on to things. They say, they are the bee's knees. I don't even know what that means, but I've heard that expression before. I think it means I like them. They're beautiful or something. They're good looking. And they spend time at accelerated rates. And when you cut yourself off from your friends and your family, and the one person who's become the absolute center of your life who replaces God is that, all of a sudden it's a blinder, and you start looking a lot like Diesel, and you start bumping into things. And I've counseled people before, many people, that have been in dating relationships. 1 minute, they're on, the next minute they're off. And then they take the person back, and then they put the blinder back on. And the litmus test is this with relationships. Are they causing me to look to the light? Or are they leading me into a wall? If they are, drop the top. And I'm not saying that as Christ followers that we're to isolate ourselves from the world. We're called to engage the world and to make friendships and to deal with messy people. I get that. But your closest relationships should be those that actually bring you closer to God's Son. That gets you focused on the light instead of leading you into a wall. What's another box top blinder that we could think of? Let's see if I got another box top in here somewhere. Career, that's a good one. I defined it a little more broad. Success. That's a good thing, right? We celebrate the successes in our life. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that can lead to a bad thing. When we make success the God of our lives, the number one thing. What is success? Success is Detroit beating Green Bay in Green Bay, first time since 1991. That's success. Success is a field goal from 41 yards in Columbus, Ohio.
Where is it?
I couldn't believe it. A shaky kicker delivers in the crunch time. You know, the moment that Detroit beat Green Bay in Green Bay, I was waiting for the trumpet to sound. I was like, the Lord is returning. Today is the day. What is success? Is it more money in the bank? Is it a certain house, a certain car? Is it meeting certain milestones? My box tops don't want to cooperate. I'm just going to throw them down. All those are good things. We need money in the bank. We need a place to live. We need a reliable car. But we need to accomplish things in our lives. Those are good things. As long as we don't substitute it for God. See, success can drive our decision making. And when it does, it takes a toll on our health, on our family relationships. When we make it the thing we pursue, when we throw ourselves 100% into our work, we're out of balance and it becomes a blinder instead of a blessing. Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. You want to know what success is? Success is what God produces in your life. I like to define, according to the Bible, success being love, success being joy, success being peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Take off that worldly counterfeit definition of success that will lead us into a brick wall. You can get all the stuff that your heart desires, but in the end, if you don't have love, if you don't have peace, if you don't have joy in your life, was it worth it? I'm putting Jesus first. I'm following Him wherever He may lead. We already know He says, if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness. You won't have to have the sin that will entangle you and entrap you and lead you to places that you shouldn't be. Because you will have the light that leads to life. You'll find a lot of success, a whole lot of success, a whole lot of peace, a whole lot of joy and kindness and goodness and self-control. John 8, Jesus says He is the light of the world. But then in John 9, let's flip over there real quick. John 9, one chapter. The entire chapter is devoted to a man who was born blind. Is this a coincidence? He's talking about having light and being able to see and not having to stumble in darkness and run into things. And then it progresses to a man who physically cannot see, who was born blind. I love the progression here. Jesus is the light of the world. Follow Him. Physical, spiritual, emotional light He brings. And I love the story of this one man. He has blindness until he meets the light of the world. Kids are having a good time. I love it. So Jesus is walking with His disciples. I'm going to set the scene for us. And they encounter this blind man who's hanging outside of the gates. And don't get down on this guy because he's begging for money. But you have to understand something, that this was a different time. There was no Medicaid, there was no Medicare, there was no help for those who were disabled. So those who could not make a living would stand outside of the gate where all the religious leaders and people would go, and they would hold out their hands and people would support them. This is how things worked. And it was a genuine thing. Only those who really had a need were out there begging for money. You didn't have people pulling in $200,000 a year who could do whatever. So don't get this modern picture in your head of who's out there. You got a blind guy. You got a guy who can't walk. You got all these different people. You got somebody with just about every spectrum of disability that you can imagine that's there. And he has his hand out, and it's a religious holiday, and so he thinks that this is going to be a good day for me. I normally get ones. I don't know what their equivalent would be. I didn't look it up. But I normally get a $1 bill. But people are going to feel generous today. It's like our Christmas. People are going to put maybe a 20 in my hand. And maybe I'll get a little something extra, and I can get something a little nice for myself. And so he has his hand out. And John 9:6 says this. Then he, Jesus, spit on the ground. He made mud with the saliva, and he spreads the mud over the blind man's eyes. You all seeing that in your mind right now? That's like a gross factor of 10, is it not? Like, mud is bad, but Saliva mud, that's a whole nother level. And so I thought when I'm reading this story, the first thought I had was, good thing he couldn't see it coming. And that's terrible. That's a bad thing to think. There's not a lot of advantages to being blind, but I thought, well, maybe this is one of them. It's a good thing he didn't see that coming. But then I thought, let me put myself in his shoes. And we know that when somebody has a sense, like when they're blind, all their other senses are heightened, right? So I bet this guy had the best hearing in the world. And so is this a crowded place? And every time someone gets ready to spit, there's a noise. I'm not even going to gross people out because we got some awesome coffee hour stuff over there. I want you to be able to finish that off. But there's a sound that's made when you get ready to spit. And so I'm sure he heard that, and he might have even been a little grossed out. Like, wow, that was pretty close to me, I'm pretty sure. And then what happens next must have really caught him off guard. He has his hand out. He hears the spit noise, and all of a sudden, boom! Wow, you could have just said no. You could have just kept on walking. What was that all about? And he feels the saliva and the mud all over his eyes. And in verse 7, Jesus, it says, told him, go wash yourself in the pool at Siloam, which means sent. And so the man went and washed, and he came back seeing. One of the things that I've never really dissected is, why did Jesus do that? Why did Jesus spit in the mud and smear it all over the guy's face, in his eyes? Jesus was demonstrating something to all of us, something very powerful here. He was teaching us that all of our body parts, everything about us, came from the ground, the earth. It talks about that in the creation story, right? We were made from the dust and the dirt of the earth. And because creation is fallen, the work of creation cannot open this man's eyes. Sure, you can go ahead and you can put some mud. You can take a nice mud bath. You can get some ointment, some salve that you put on your eyes, and it might help a little bit. You can turn to creation and you can experience some benefits. But it will never open this man's eyes. Only the work of redemption can give this man sight. And that is why he is sent. He is sent to a place called Sent, referring to the sent one, Jesus Christ. He was sent by the sent one to the sent place. And when the blind man washed his eyes in the pools of the sent one, he received supernatural healing to his eyes. And I want to say to us today, when we go to Jesus, the sent one, who redeemed us with the price of his blood. If we believe that by his stripes we are healed, we will have greater health than anybody who puts their trust in creation for their health and their restoration. Jesus was the sent one who redeemed us from every curse that came about on creation through Adam. He redeemed us from sickness, pain, sorrow, depression, poverty, and even death itself. The world may know